Jack here, owner of Hockey Alley, bringing you back hockey history. Stories that forgotten, stories that you haven't heard about, or stories that you remember. Today I have NHL goaltender from the Pittsburgh Penguins, Michel Dion. How are you doing, Michel?
Very good, Jack. How about you?
Very good, thank you. Thank you for coming on and talking to me on my channel. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
My pleasure. It's always good to go back in the past and see some memories from the great game.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. I want to ask you, how old were you when you started playing goalie?
Well, in organized hockey, I was 10. It's funny because I started baseball at 6 and hockey is 10, which is unusual for a Canadian kid.
Yeah.
But it only took me like 5 years to make it to junior hockey, which is the equivalent of college hockey here.
Wow.
So at 15, I was playing junior hockey. So, obviously, I could see that something good was happening fast, and it was a God-given talent, that it was just there, and just saw fit to pursue it. I loved it, and then it happened fast for me.
Yeah, very quick. And so in 5 years, so the time you started and to get to, so just 5 years and you played major junior.
Yeah, I was playing for
Wow.
the Montreal Junior Canadiens in the big forum, went from playing in front of 32 people in midget hockey the year before to a forum full of people, which contained 18,000 people back then. So it was a little nerve-wracking the first year, but it was fun.
Wow, that's amazing. Amazing. Did you start skating before that? Were you like playing as a player or anything, or did you just go straight into goal?
Yeah, I was skating outside just for fun, shooting pucks like everybody else. But then one day, I was trying to play for a hockey team, and the goalie got hurt, and I was a forward, and somebody had to volunteer to go in goal, and I said, "Well, I'll do it," and I never came out.
Wow. And how did you learn to play goalie? Did someone teach you, or were you just playing a lot of games, or did you have a brother who was shooting on you?
Well, I remember my dad bought me my first set of pads, at Christmas. I guess that would have been like in probably 64. And that same morning, even though it was like 20 below zero, he says, "Come on, we'll go to the park and I'll shoot some pucks on you and I'll break those pads in." So I put the pads on, and there was nobody out there, just him and I. It was so cold and it was Christmas, and he shot some pucks, and so that got me going. That's shortly after I was goaltender on the team, and didn't have any. I wasn't playing. I didn't have any pads, so I was playing goal with regular forward pads for a few games. And Dad says, "You're going to need some pads." So
Yeah.
he bought them for me, and then he got me going, and we just kept going.
That's awesome. Wow. And what did you have an idol growing up, a goaltender or?
Yes, yes. I like Jacques Plante a lot. He was the goalie for the Canadiens at that point. I remember going to see my first game at the Forum. He was playing, and Glenn Hall was playing against him. So I like these two guys a lot.
Wow.
And because I remembered that first game so fondly. And then also after that, I like Roger Crozier a lot because I like the way he played his pads. I like Glenn Hall a little bit on for low shots on the ice, in the corners. And he was kind of one of the first guys to do that, and both of them actually. And instead of just standing up for everything, so I adopted a little bit about the Plante's stand-up style and Glenn Hall and Crozier style. Going down the ice for low shots and standing up for high shots, and that kind of built my foundation for playing goal.
Yeah, the styles changed completely today from back
Oh
then.
my gosh!
Yeah.
Yes. Now they play on their knees. They slide across. They don't have to have fast feet. They don't have to come out, cut the angles. They just seem to just flop and use their size to play. But even if they're tall, they still get beat up top all the time. So I don't think that you use all the elements that we used in goaltending back then.
Yeah.
And that you have to play with as much talent. Obviously, you still got to be fast, have good reflexes, but you're not playing the angles or moving your feet like you were back in our days. And you use your your quickness and then just your size to play it. But I just don't like the way they play high shots, and they get beat a lot up top, even if they're 6'5".
Yeah. So you're saying back then, would the coaches be upset if you dropped a lot?
Oh yeah.
Oh really?
Absolutely. Eddie Johnson was my goaltender coach. Well, he was my coach. He was an ex-goalie, and he played forever in the NHL.
Yeah.
The Boston Bruins especially, and he told me, he says, "Man, I don't want you to go down for nothing. Just stand your ground. Don't make the first move and stand up. And you'll see just by playing position, most of the pucks will hit you," which is very true. But you got to have a lot of nerve to do that and trust your position and not want to be fidgety and make all kinds of moves you don't really need to make.
Yeah. Today, I mean, a lot of the kids shoot high, and it would be just wise to stand up. I agree.
Yeah, and that's why they shoot high. It's because goaltending's played on the knees, and it leaves the top of the net open, and so they can pick the top corners. They can score goals.
Yeah, definitely. And how many years did you play goalie in the NHL and WHA, World Hockey Association, which was like the NHL? So
I played 11 years altogether, 5 in the World Hockey and 6 in the NHL. Indianapolis and Cincinnati were my teams in WHA, 3 in Indianapolis and 2 in Cincinnati. And then when the league fell apart, I went to the NHL and played in Quebec 2 years, and then in Pittsburgh the other 4 years.
And in Indianapolis, that Wayne Gretzky's first year of pro hockey?
Well, yeah, it was. But that's the year I went to Cincinnati. I followed my old coach, Jacques Demers. He brought me to Cincinnati with him because Indianapolis was bought by a Canadian man, and then he got rid of all of us, so we had to find jobs on other teams. So I went to Cincinnati, and that's when I played against Gretzky the first time. And
then you had Mark Messier on your team, correct?
Yes, absolutely. Messier came to us while Gretzky was in Indianapolis, and Mark was a great kid. I remember I had an old Corvette, a 65 Corvette, and that I bought, and he really liked it. And I said, you'll be able to buy yourself one of those soon. It was his first year. He didn't make any money. So I want to say like 12 years later, my last training camp was in Edmonton in 86. And I saw him come in the building one day, and he came in with his Porsche. He says, he gets out of the car. He says, "Hey, Marcus, does that mean that my old Corvette's out of the question now?" And he was just laughing. He says, "Yeah, I did love that car years back then."
That's a cool car. That's awesome.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It was souped up with the truss pipes, and the split window. So it was just a neat car.
Yeah. So that's all. I want to ask you. So in Cincinnati, you had Jacques Demers, who coached the Montreal Canadiens. You had Barry Melrose, correct?
Yes.
And who else? Blaine Stoughton. Yes.
Yeah, Stoughton. And we played in the NHL All-Star game together in '82 in Washington when he was with Hartford, I think. And Mike Gardner, of course, was part of our team.
Wow. Yeah, that's right.
So we had a great team, really. We just Gardner and Mark Messier and you're talking 2 Hall of Famers right there. Mike Liut and I were playing goal. So Mike Liut had a great year and a great stint with St. Louis.
Yes. And did they stand out, Gardner and Messier, at that time? They were, young guys. Did you see any future in them at the time, or were they still developing?
Yeah, Mike Gardner, you could tell he was already on his way there. But Mark Messier was only 17. It was his first year. He only scored 1 goal all year, believe it or not.
Wow.
And he scored from center ice. Oh. It was a funny bounce, but you could tell that the talent that he has. His skating, his shooting, the toughness. It was all there. You could just tell it was going to be awesome.
So he was tough back then. Did anybody try to mess with him back then, or not really? A 17-year-old.
Not really that much. He was tough, but he wasn't brash and bold as he got later on.
Yeah.
Because he was just a kid and he was just starting out. He was still junior age, really, playing in the WHA. So that tells you how good he was.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, as a 17-year-old to play pro hockey, it's just
yeah. So I'm sure it was intimidating for him a lot. So Bugsy Watson and I were hanging around him a lot and helping him out and
that's nice.
Making sure he was okay.
Yeah. And here's a question: what's the hardest shot you ever faced?
Yeah, there were a few of those, I remember Wilson, Chicago Blackhawk defenseman Doug Wilson. Had one of the hardest slap shots I faced from the point, and you had a guy whose name was Reed Larson with the Detroit Red Wings.
Yeah,
an awful hard shot. And forward, of course, Mike Gardner always had one of the good shots, but Rick Vive, I remember Rick Vive in Toronto one time. He's coming down the wing, and somebody passed the puck across to him from the other wing, and he one-timed it. So I was just making the shift across the net and was turning to face Vive. And since he was a one-timer, I didn't have time to get set up completely. And the puck hit me on the outside of the glove, not the inside, as I was trying to open it up. And I remember thinking, right away that I felt a little sting in there, and the play kept going for another 30 seconds or so, and my hand was getting hot. So at the end of the whistle, 30 seconds, I took the glove off, and he had taken my nail completely off.
Ooh.
And it was just hanging by a piece of skin, and the blood was coming out in the middle of the finger in a kind of a torpedo type style. So he had a heavy shot, And Ricky Martin did too for Buffalo. I played with him with the Montreal Junior Canadiens, and he had probably the best and the hardest wrist shot. And the other guys had hard slap shots, but Ricky Martin had a quick, heavy wrist shot.
Yeah. And what about Bobby Hull? Did you ever face him in the WHA?
Yeah, I remember when I was with Indianapolis. We went to play Winnipeg, and I was finally gonna face one of my big childhood idols, and he's coming down the wing, and suddenly I'm thinking, oh boy, there he is with the big slap shot. He comes down the wing in Winnipeg, lets one go, and I come out to cut down the angles, and suddenly I look, and the puck was in my glove. I remember looking at my glove for like 5 seconds, thinking, I just gloved him. And so I was in the first period, so that gave me confidence enough to have a good game. I remember we won the game 2-1. Wow. And I remember thinking, I loved Bobby Hall's slap shot. And all these years as a kid, I watched him come down the wing and blast them through all kinds of goalies.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, I think I can play at that level.
Yeah, that was great. You watch NHL today and you watch in the past, a lot more guys took slap shots, looks like, back then than today. I just don't see too much slap shots anymore.
Yeah, well, the guys are bigger. Their strides are longer. Their reaches are longer. And so there's not as much time to get set up unless you get a 2-on-1 break or you come down the wing by yourself. Or you get a special break. There's not that much time to let slap shots go anymore. It's all wrist shots.
Yeah.
So, the game has changed in that way. Guys being bigger and with longer reaches and some of the rinks are, I don't know how big some of them new buildings are, but back then, the rinks were smaller, so that wouldn't have influenced anything. But nowadays, if some of the buildings are still small, there's no time to set up for them. They got to one time everything, or take rebounds, or take quick wrist shots in the slots, and so that's probably changed the game a bit as well.
Yeah, Boston Garden was small, and Chicago Stadium were small.
Yeah, very small. Even the Rangers rink is small, and they're still playing in there. So these were Buffalo Auditorium was very small. So for goalie, it was good because if you came out to cut the angles, the your hand was smaller, and it was easy to be hot and have everything hit you in those buildings. Compared to my rink in Pittsburgh was the opposite; it was bigger,
Yeah.
so I had to play the angles in a different way.
That's what that's what I was going to get to you. So if you're playing a regulation size 200 by 85, you play it a little different than say the Chicago Stadium, which was I think like 185 length by.
Yes.
Yeah, so you play
Yeah.
different.
Yes.
Yeah. What about European rink? Have you ever played on those?
No, I never
No.
did play the big European rings. That would have been an adjustment because they were a lot bigger,
Yeah.
and the guys had more room to skate and set up. So that would have been a different style. But I never really got to play in them.
And then have you seen any like European goalies come here and struggle because of the size of the rink, or was it easier going from bigger to smaller rink for them? But did you
I would think it would be a lot easier to adapt to smaller rings because, especially back then, like I said, we played on our feet and we came out to cut the angles down. So pucks hit you a lot more in smaller rinks than if you play the game that way than on bigger rinks. So I would think it would be a little easier. We'd have had a tougher time to get adjusted to the bigger rinks than they would have smaller rinks.
Got it. Yes.
I played with Leif Holmquist in Indianapolis some, and he was the Swedish national goaltender for many years, and he was playing really well in our buildings.
Oh, so he was an easy adjustment for him. So it was no problem.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, and there was other European goalies were playing well too, so I don't think they had too much trouble.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about the goalie mask. You had one of the coolest masks in Pittsburgh, the design and the colors. Did you choose that design?
No, I was actually the guy that made my masks all these years was Michel Lefevre in Quebec City. Mm-hmm. And then one day, as I was playing for the Nordiques at the beginning of my second year there, my second year in the NHL, he heard a knock on my hotel room during training camp. I opened the door, and that was him. He says, "There, I made a mask for you. See if you like that." And it was the mask that everybody talks about, and it didn't have a paint job on it. It was all white, but I looked at it and I tried it, and I liked that it covered the neck. I liked that it came away from the neck, so I couldn't have any problems bending my head down. And so it was a great fit. And when I got to Pittsburgh the following year, I just had a friend of mine just paint it with the paint job that everybody knows the mask for.
Yeah.
And that was it.
So it was the only mask you ever had? Did you own more than one?
Yeah, besides the last mask I had, I kept it till the end of my career for the last few years. But I had other masks before, and they were all kind of similar to that, but they didn't have the neck piece. They weren't as long as this one was.
And did the Hall of Fame get any of them? The Hockey Hall of Fame?
That's a good question. I don't know what happened to them. This one last mask, I was supposed to exchange it. I was getting a new one, which I still have here, as a matter of fact. It's still white. I only used it for my last training camp in Edmonton, so it's just got a couple of scratches on it, but it's all white. I never got it painted. But the other one, I was supposed to exchange it for an action shot oil painting that somebody from Detroit painted. And I told my trainer, I said, "Yeah, go ahead, do the trade because I'm getting a new mask anyway." So what happened? The mask got sent away, and I never got the picture. And of course, that's 1 year that I missed. I missed 1 year before my last training camp in Edmonton because I had knee injuries and I got operated on my knee, and I missed that 1 year completely. And decided to come back the following year. And Edmonton says, "Well, you know what? You can come have training camp with us," because by missing a year, I was a free agent and I could go anywhere I wanted to go. So that was the plus side of missing a year because of a knee operation. I could go anywhere. So I went to Edmonton and used the other mask I had made. But I never. What happened to the mask? Last I heard of it, so they got sold on eBay or YouTube years ago for $6,000.
Wow.
Two friends of mine, emailed me that same day. One from Toronto, one from Boston. They said, "Hey, do you know your old mask is just sold on?" I think it was on YouTube, but I'm not sure. But I said, just got sold. I said, no. So I haven't heard from it since I was supposed to get an oil painting. I never got from it. So that was it. I don't know exactly what happened after that, what happened to it. Now it got, why I never got the painting, and now it got sent away, but I never got the mask back.
I mean, sad. I wish you had it.
I know.
Do you ever keep any of your jerseys? Did you keep?
Yeah, well, I had some of them, and I got in financial troubles a few years ago. Well, not trouble, but my wife and I weren't doing good at that point. So I said, you know what, I'm going to sell every piece of hockey equipment and jersey I have. So I sold them away. And so I have one jersey left from Pittsburgh.
Okay. Yeah. I want to ask you, with the goalie gear that you used to wear, how heavy is it compared to today's gear? Because people don't know what's out there back in the day.
Well, I had 35 pounds of equipment on me back then. I don't know what they have now, but nothing was waterproof, and everything got soaked and wet. And by the third period, when you were the most tired, your legs had to show up with the heaviest pads you had all game. So, we trained our legs to be really strong. I had strong legs and thighs. And an example, in the old Chicago Stadium, you had to climb like 25 steps to go from the dressing room, which was in the engine room, to the rink. Yeah. So by the third period, they started really fast because they knew the goalie's legs were out of whack for a while. Not only was it the third period and the pads were wet and heavy, but this guy just climbed up 25 stairs with his pads on. So that poured it on him the first few minutes, So we didn't have the privilege of having waterproof equipment or bigger equipment like they have now.
Yeah.
And most of us weren't big in size like a lot of these goalies. So a lot of these guys are 6'5", 6'4", and with big equipment, that explains why you can play a flopping style, because of course they got quickness and they're still playing in the NHL and they're still great goalies, but you can play on your knees because you can cover a lot of the top of the net. And unless the guys really get sharp in the two top corners, you're not going to get beat. But if they are, you will get beat, and they do get beat a lot. Yeah. And even if they're big, so I just think it's more of a game played on size, on your knees, than quick feet and cutting the angles, standing up, like we used to with old equipment. So I don't necessarily think that they're better than we were. I'm not going to say they're worse than we were, but that explains a lot of why the averages are lower, and the game is a lot more defensive or more two ways. Yeah. Our game was a lot more wide open, and we had a lot more breakaways and 2-on-1s and 3-on-2s than I see now.
Different.
So our goals against were a good goal and a quarter higher per game, but you still had guys like Grant Fuhr and Patrick Roy and just all these guys. And Patrick was actually the first one that played the game on his knees. I think he introduced that kind of game. Yeah. Dan Bouchard is about the only one in my era that played that way. And, he was a big guy too, and he was good at playing that way. And but everybody else played moving their feet, coming out, cutting down the angles, lateral motion on their feet, and not on their knees, sliding.
Yeah, I was telling my friend months ago, like, if I was thinking outside the box, I'd get a sumo wrestler from Japan. Just barely teach him how to skate. Just have him on his knees. And I think he would win.
And they'd have to fill the top of the net on him. So don't let him shoot from far. Let him shoot from close in. They don't have time to lift it.
Well, there's some big sumo guys. That's no problem. We can find them.
But it's almost getting that way. I look at some of these guys. Man, these guys are huge.
Yeah, definitely.
You got to learn to beat them without having to beat them. Through a rebound with a half-empty net or whatever.
Yeah, and you're also a professional golf player and a golf teacher. How did you get started in that?
Well, I always liked golf in the off season when I played hockey, and you always wonder, man, I'm not going to play hockey forever. What am I going to do when I leave hockey? And I thought, I've always been in sports and baseball and hockey, and that's why not try to become a golf pro. And then Then I, after hockey, I just went and studied and got licensed and to teach golf, and became a golf pro, and that's where I've been the last 13 years, teaching in a golf college.
Nice.
Here on Hilton Head. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And I want to ask you, is there anything you would add or change with goaltending? Pads, rules, anything? What would you change?
I would like to see him come back to original equipment more. I think the fans like to see more goals, and the equipment being bigger, lighter, especially with the guys being bigger. It takes some of the show away, and the skill that goaltenders have to have.
Got it.
Like I said, I mean, you still have to be quick and gutsy to play in the NHL, but you don't have to play the angles the same. You don't have to move your feet up and down or sideways the same. So it's taken some of the skills off, and probably from the game itself, taking some of the scoring away, which is something the fans love to see.
Yeah.
So I would like that. I don't have any problems with the equipment being waterproof, but don't make the glove big enough that it's double the size it used to be, or the pads, being a half-inch bigger on each side. Or either do that or make the goal bigger. The goalies wouldn't like that, but
no.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I'm saying that it just too much is too much sometimes, and we live in an era of too much, and where you lose balance. And without balance, you kind of start getting on extremes a little too much, and extremes have never been a good place to be in anything. So.
What I saw back then is you played in a square crease. Today they have a round crease where they're lining up perfect for the angle. Square crease was a lot tougher. People don't know that when you lined up in the net, you didn't have precise where your posts were like they do today. People don't know that.
No, because you can use the round line and the square line at the top of the circle to know exactly where you need to be.
Yeah.
On certain shots, and with the square box, you had to go outside the box and figure out where to be for specific shots and how far you could come out or not, and so you had to play the angles better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of the average fan out there doesn't know that. And
and you had to know where your posts were and have a good idea where you were in your crease and so on. So that's another change that I think it took away some of the mental aspects of goaltending.
Yeah, I would go back to the square crease if I was a commissioner. I think it would probably get more scoring going.
Yeah, not all improvements are good. I don't have anything against changes, providing that they're good. But sometimes you can make changes that make things less valuable or less profitable for the game than in anything. It's kind of like that too, I believe.
Yes. Yeah. Michel, I want to thank you so much for coming on and talking to me. It was an honor to have you.
Well, it's my pleasure. I'm thankful that you gave me that opportunity.
You're welcome.
To think back about memories and hockey, and it's always going to be a big part of my life. It's never over.
No.
Once you've been in the top levels, it's what people know you for and love you for, and it's a reason to thank God forever, because He gave you skills to make it to the top of the world in a specific area or sport, and that's always something to be thankful for. And I for one, never take that for granted.
Yes. Definitely. And the great stories. Love all the stories you had today. It was awesome.
Yeah, it's there's a lot of them. You forget how many good stories there are. I could tell you a few more, but it's just great. To have been a privilege. You got to count yourself privileged to have had such experiences that a lot of people don't get a chance to have.
Yes. Yes.
So it's always a pleasure to share them.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Well, we're a great one. I'll talk to you soon.
Very good, Jack. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.